Hi, friends. Today I'm interviewing Stacie Meredith. She's a home birth midwife that I had the pleasure of connecting with a few months ago. So Stacie, why don't you introduce yourself? Tell us about what you do.
Good morning, Allie. Thanks for having me here. As you said, I'm Stacie Meredith. I am a registered midwife and a certified professional midwife. So the registered midwife part is from Colorado, and the certified professional is a national designation, which would help me move to other states. So it's very well organized and smooth for the most part. So I started attending births in 2000 as a doula in Florida at the hospitals, and just knew instinctively that there had to be a better way for birthing, a better way of supporting birthing families, and what could I do to help that. It's very strange because I don't have children. My friends weren't having children, and it was totally by somebody's recommendation that I should look into being a doula. So I was lucky enough to find a school close to where I lived in Florida, Florida School of Traditional Midwifery. Fabulous school, wonderful education. Home birth it's in my soul. Like, there's no other place that I would rather be practicing and supporting families and babies.
That's beautiful. So tell me a little bit about your experience being a doula, just because I'm curious. I know we talked a little bit about it when we spoke last time we were in person together, but how did you kind of know, like, when was that clicking point that you were like, okay, I think I want to be a midwife? And like, what was your transition from doula hood to being a midwife?
The transition didn't take that long. It was probably my second birth at the Florida hospital. And I want to say that this was 20 years ago. And so what I experienced then hopefully is not what is happening now. Like, consumers' voice has changed so much in that time. But at the time, it was just really not well supported woman care. Like, the nurses weren't involved. Nobody wanted to help this young woman have a natural birth. So they put me in there with her, which is what I wanted to do. But it just felt like the whole culture was just non-supportive. And so it didn't take me very long to think, like, this is so bizarre. Like, all of these medical procedures are just so bizarre on a young, healthy woman. So a friend of mine gave me a book called Ina May's Guide to Spiritual Midwifery. Have you heard of it? Have you read it?
Yeah, it's wonderful.
I love it. So that was my light bulb moment. That was like the sureness that, like, I had to do this. I had no idea what the political feelings were around it, or that it was quite so fringy at that time. But I don't think once you get the bug, it doesn't go away.
For sure.
Yeah. So for me, going into doula to midwife was very smooth and very quick. And I didn't have to undo a lot of hospital training because I wasn't in the hospital for very long.
Sure. So did you immediately know you kind of wanted to do the home birth route, or did you explore in the hospital realm as well?
I explored both options, looking at becoming a CNM, which is a nurse midwife, or a certified nurse, and then you become a midwife. And that did not feel supportive to me. Like, when I reviewed the classes, and when I did the tour, and they were like, yeah, this professor tries really hard to fail you and get people to drop out. I was like, oh my gosh, that's a lot of pressure.
That's harsh.
It felt harsh. And so then I went to Florida School of Traditional Midwifery, and I interviewed them. And they were like, we're going to do whatever we can to support you on your road. You just let us know. We're here for you. And it was really quite the guide for me through that process. But again, it was just like coming home, like meeting with them, and that kind of connection and support is what I really like in midwifery. Like, not just for our clients, but for the other midwives as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
We have to, in the birth world, we have to hold each other up and like support one another. It's so important.
For sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what do you love about being a home birth midwife?
Gosh, there's so many things to love
For sure.
about it. But right now, after having just done 4 births very quickly, I am loving the postpartum and leaving moms and babes and families tucked in bed when we leave. And they don't have to get packed up. They don't have to put their baby in a car seat. And then I provide excellent postpartum care. It's very in-depth. It's just so much better than anything modern medicine has to offer in the United States right now.
Absolutely. That's
Yeah.
wonderful.
Yeah. I like being low tech. I do like having tech available if we need it. It's very comforting to me to know that we have so many good hospitals close by if there is an emergency.
Yeah.
And most of the time for low risk healthy women, non-interventive birth is awesome.
That's great. Yeah, I guess we can kind of transition into this section of my interview. So who do you think, like, is there an ideal client for home birth?
That's a good question. Well, physically, yes, you have to be low risk and healthy. You can't have gestational diabetes. You can't have just so many other things. You have to be within the realm of normal. But so many of those things can be prevented or circumvented by diet and exercise and herbs and acupuncture. So before just some like being like, oh, you have that, you can't be in our practice. We try to get someone healthy before we risk them out if possible.
Wonderful. Yeah. And what about like mental space?
Mental space, for my ideal client, I like somebody who is knowledgeable and is willing to do some research on their own, but will also come back and tell me what they've learned and then take my opinion into account for that as well. Those are my favorite.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And I also really love working with VBAC women, vaginal birth after cesarean. And because a lot of them are in an emotional space of trauma, of birth trauma. And I feel like home birth and my care and midwives care can really help support them through that healing and help them have that vaginal birth at home. And if not, then help them have the vaginal birth in the hospital. You know, like if we can't be at home, then be there. But I love supporting my VBAC clients.
Yeah, that's really special. So if they were choosing to be at the hospital, you could go and help them there too.
Yeah, I provide something called monitoring services. So it's similar to what a doula does, but I can check dilation, take blood pressure, listen to heart tone. So I can do more of the physical monitoring for those parents who want to stay home as long as possible, but still need to get in, you know, to give birth in the hospital. But if they don't go until 7 centimeters, then they're less likely to get that cascade of intervention.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's great. So, you know, talking to the population that is interested or potentially interested in having their baby at home, what can you say to them? Like, what should they know about home birth? Are there any like specific things that you need to know about the process or to be prepared for, besides like doing your due diligence and researching and all that sort of stuff, taking care of their bodies and whatnot?
I would just say that if someone is looking for empowered care and providers who really listen, then home birth is probably the right thing for you. If you want a lot of time with your provider, because most midwives, we give an hour prenatal, an hour postpartum, or longer if needed. So, yeah, just know that like we're in. We are in and we take good care of our clients and we tend to be more available. And I'm making a blanket statement. every midwife is different.
Sure.
Do your interviews, find one that connects with you. Yeah,
Yeah.
we're not all the same, and yet we all offer really excellent care as
Yeah.
far as being licensed in Colorado, registered in Colorado.
I've always found it interesting that, and like kind of baffling that if you're seeing an OB or a doctor, you know, you have very little time actually with them, and they aren't really in the birthing room until they may like peek in every now and then, but they're not really there until showtime, you know? So I think it's really great that you form a bond and a relationship and a good connection with your
Yeah.
families, because that's, I mean, that's the good, juicy support. Like that's what helps, I don't know, just like the confidence and knowing you're really well supported, I think is so important.
Agreed.
Yeah.
It's hard work. It is definitely, having a home birth is definitely hard work, and it's empowering and worth it.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So excuse me. So you were talking about your prenatals. What do you usually cover in those?
Depending on their gestation, we do a lot about education of where they're at. And then of course we do the physical monitoring. We check blood if we need to, listen to heart tones, take weight, check your urine, feel the baby under our hand. That I love. That is so fun.
Your eyes just lit up. I love it.
It's so fun to feel a baby growing and then to get to meet them on the outside and be like, that's who you were.
Oh yeah.
It's so magical. Every time I do it, it's magical. And yeah, so a lot of it is just about preparing for the birth mentally, how to prepare family for the birth. And we often talk about parenting because, you know, birth is only a part of it. Then you're going to have this baby for the rest of your life. So it's a good idea to kind of know what you're going to do with the baby sometimes.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And then I also like having children at my prenatals. That can be really fun. But I also enjoy it when parents can come by themselves, because then we can go really deep. It's a totally different situation, and both are a lot of fun.
Yeah, absolutely. So do they come to your office or do you go to their home?
They come to my office. I have a new office, new to me. I've been in it a year now, here in Longmont, and it is part of my house. My husband and I bought a fixer-upper in 2019, and it was definitely a fixer-upper. And we have a little office here, and I love it. It's great. We go to clients at 36 weeks for the home visit, and we being the second midwife and any other team member that is going to be there. And then I go again, then they meet me at the office at 37. I go to their house at 38, you know, so we alternate. So
Sure.
I get used to being there and they get used to seeing me. And then postpartums are in their home until 4 weeks. And then the 6 weeks postpartum is in the office.
Lovely.
Yeah.
That was another one of my questions. You work with assists or like a second midwife. I assume that happens every time. Do you have a specific person you work with, or do you kind of work with a bunch of different people?
I like working with a lot of different midwives. It's good for community, and it's good for just like, how do they pack their bags? But I share my office with Cheryl Fuhrer, and so we are doing a lot of births together.
Cool.
And dog sitting and covering each other's practice when we go on vacation.
Awesome.
But I also work with other midwives too, and I try really hard to get my second midwife or birth assistant to really have a good experience with the client. So, you know, not all midwives are right for each person. So I try to judge too based on personality.
Sure. And what is their role in the birth process?
So the second midwife usually comes at when family is about 8 centimeters moving into transition. So she's there for the birth of the baby, and she typically is on baby. So she's monitoring baby, making sure respirations are good, color, all of that. And then I stay on mom, help deliver the placenta, manage bleeding. So we like to have one for each.
Awesome. That's great.
Yeah.
So let's see. I'm just looking at my list here. So if you could talk a little bit about what supplies they need for a home birth, like do you set them up with a birth like pack, or do you say, okay, grab these different things, and what are those things?
It's a little bit of both. I have a birth kit that they order around 36 weeks, or around 35 weeks. We like to have it at the house at 36 weeks. And those include like diapers for postpartum, mama diapers, depend, and the flat pads and the peri bottle, just things like that. Gloves for the midwives, alcohol prep pads, things for the baby. And then things that they grab around the house would be trash bags, large Ziploc bags to put the placenta in after the birth, a couple of bowls, one for placenta if they're in the pool, one for throwing up, because sometimes in labor, mamas throw up a lot. So they just gather the things from around the house. And if they have a water birth, then they definitely would need to have, you know, the liner for the pool, a hose, an adapter. Yeah, so then they would have, and they would need extra towels for that too.
Sure. And do you provide the pool?
I do.
Yeah. Cool. Awesome. Cool.
And it is a great tool. Even if mamas don't end up birthing in there, sometimes just using it for pain relief can be amazing.
Absolutely. And what can you say to people who might be interested in a home birth, but they're worried about like the mess and ruining their house?
It is not nearly as messy as everybody thinks. It tends to be very tidy. We're very good at making sure there's coverages on the ground and on the bed, and we clean up the mess. So, you know, families in bed, meeting the new baby, no partner is responsible for cleaning. We start the laundry, take out the trash, break down the pool, feed the mom. Which is nice when we have doulas there, because they also help with those things too. So that's always lovely to have extra hands.
Yeah.
But it is not that messy. And in the hospital, they let it get messy because they can, you know, because they know people are going to come and clean it up. But we clean as we go, because we know nobody's coming in after us. So
yeah, totally.
Yeah.
So for the people who do have to transfer to the hospital, like what are those reasons? Like what cases would you have to transfer? And most of the time, are you able to like go in and help and support them?
So in the case of transfers, usually what happens is for things that we can't fix at home with food and hydration. Like a lot of times, baby's heart tones can be funky if mom is needing to change positions or hydrate or eat. And then if that doesn't rectify the problem, we go in. And usually I call ahead, I let the hospital of choice know why we're coming, and then they're there to meet us when we go in. We try to make it as smooth as possible. It is often disappointing because that's not where we want to be. So there is a little bit of emotional process along with that. But I really, really, really believe in the fact that it is not a failed home birth. It is a change in plan when we have new information. The information may be that you have meconium in your water and we need to be in the hospital. The information might be that it's been a 3-day labor and you could benefit from an epidural and a nap. You know, those are pieces of information that we don't have when we're planning this big event. So we do the best we can in planning it, and then we stay flexible in however the birth needs to happen.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
what tools do you bring to birth with you that could categorize as like interventions or just help as far as like anything medical in the medical realm?
Our biggest tool that we use is our Doppler for listening to fetal heart tones. We listen regularly. That's the baby's way of communicating with us and letting us know. And a lot of us have waterproof probes, so a mama can, or a birthing person can be in the pool and we can still listen without them getting out. So that's my favorite tool. And then there's also oxygen that we bring. We bring Pitocin, Cytotec, Methergin, IV supplies. So we bring a good deal of life-saving equipment.
Yeah, awesome.
Yeah. We're all neonatal certified, neonatal resuscitation certified. So, you know, all the midwives or birth assistants that come are prepared to resuscitate a baby if need be. Like only 1% of babies really need resuscitation. 10% need a little help, only 1% needs detailed help, but we're still trying to be prepared at every birth because you have to be prepared.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And I know you talked a little bit about this, but can you speak to what being registered means and why it's important, and like the credentials there?
I'm having trouble finding the words for it. It's just a way of letting people know that you have your basic education. We all hope to have more than that after being a registered midwife since 2007. I have definitely continued to grow in my midwifery skills and will continue to do so. But to begin with, I had that bare minimum of training, which I think can be really helpful for people when they're looking for a midwife to be like, okay, the state has already done this background check on them. The state already knows that they've been educated in these ways. Sure. And so they don't have to necessarily go and I think the word is vet all of us.
Sure.
And it's a different process in every state too. So it's state to state dependent. And again, the certified professional midwife, they are trying to make a national standard, but some states have not adopted it yet. So Colorado has. So that's why I can have both the registered midwife and the CPM.
Okay, gotcha. Cool.
And again, that helps if I want to move to another state, that can help.
Yeah.
But it is so strange. It's so strange, Allie. Like some states you can do breech births, some you can't. Some you can do VBAC, some you can't. Some you can do twins, you know? So it's really just state to state dependent on what we can do.
Yeah. What can you do here in Colorado?
We can definitely do VBACs. A couple of years ago, they were trying to take that off our registration, and the VBAC community rose up and made sure that that didn't happen during legislation. And we can suture first and second degree tears. We can give IV fluids. Some of those things have just come around for us in like the last 5 to 7 years. So a lot of gratitude to the midwives who are out there making those changes for us.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And what about breech babes?
Fortunately, we can't do breeches here in Colorado. We do keep our skills up. Often a midwife in her career will have missed a breech because, you know, sometimes it just happens. A head and a butt might feel similar. So we keep the skills up for emergencies, but it's not something any of us would knowingly attend at all.
Gotcha. So that would be another reason to go to the hospital.
Yes. Yeah. If we did an exam in labor and we felt a bum, then we would be going in.
For sure.
Yeah.
So I was curious your thoughts about just the stigma of home birth, about it not being safe when it's actually really safe, and why you think our society is like a little apprehensive when it comes to having babies at home.
That's really deep.
I know. I have to talk about it though, because I feel like there wants to be this shift, but it's not promoted in a healthy way in like media and all that. So I think it's important to talk about.
I would say a lot of it is brainwashing that women's bodies don't work, that they can't work without medical help, without doctors. And it's big business. OB is big business, you know, medical, that side of it is a lot of money. But I think it's rooted in that they think we can't do it, you know. We just started moving into the hospitals in the 1940s. So before that, we were doing home birth. So it hasn't been hospital based for that long a period. Like my dad's generation, he was born at home. His siblings were born in the hospital. So it hasn't been that long, but most of us have believed what we've been told from very early on.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with that. How do you think we can kind of shift the way of thinking? I know that's like really deep. I've been trying to think about that for a while as a doula, like just trying to shift the way people think about birth and our body's ability to have babies. But
I think just doing what we are, Allie, providing the support, letting people see what good care we provide, and then telling their sisters or their cousins or their moms. And, you know, there is a pushback a lot of times for our clients from their families about it, about how it's not safe. And for them, I say educate themselves about what we do bring, how we do things at home in dangerous situations when there's true emergencies.
Sure.
Yeah. I actually welcome grandparents to come to the home visit or to call me if they need to talk about those things, because I would rather they talk about it to me before the birth than be at the birth wringing their hands, standing in the corner, being scared and like emitting that vibe in the room.
Sure. Yeah, that's really amazing. Because I do find that with a lot of people, you know, they're super set on a home birth. That's what they want. But family members are really scared and freaked out by it, which can kind of cause a rift in the relationship. So I think it's really wonderful that you bring them in and offer support to them as well.
Yeah, thank you. Sometimes it can be hard. They grill me.
Yeah, sure.
You know, being a mama bear doesn't stop just because you're about to be a grandma. There's still mama bears for their children. But it is worth it. And I think that really can give them reassurance to know that we're educated, to know that we have meds, to know that we're willing to call 911 just, you know, if we need to. So I think just them knowing like, oh yes, we have a transport plan. This is what it looks like. That can be very reassuring to them.
Absolutely.
But I think that's what we're doing. We're growing it. It's just since I've been a home birth midwife, it has taken off. But it could be the area I am in too, right? I'm surrounded by like-minded individuals. So I don't know what is actually happening in like Kentucky or, you know, I think things are progressing everywhere, but it could be a little slow.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, Colorado is pretty amazing, in my opinion. I've only supported, you know, one birth in Ohio, and the whole like culture and care surrounding her was very different. And so I definitely think the Midwest is a little slow to get in the game, but
the coasts are usually the faster ones.
Yeah.
But it's also in the hospital, change is by consumer demand. And we forget that clients forget that they're paying us. Like, they're the ones in charge. They're the ones who can advocate for themselves for a different way of being.
Mhm.
And for those of them who know they can't do it when they're in labor and they shouldn't be doing it in labor, they hire you, you know, like, yeah.
Yeah.
The other thing too, I think, is to try and educate the care providers in the hospitals if we can. And the nurse midwives are doing a fabulous job of trying to change hospital culture. Again, that's often based on consumer demand as well.
Mhm.
But that was a huge shift for me too, Allie, was when I realized, like, doctors genuinely want the best for their clients. They truly believe the epidural is the best thing, because why would you suffer?
Sure.
So I used to suspect it was about convenience or money, but I really think they have our best interest at heart.
Mhm.
It's just such a different paradigm.
Mhm.
Yeah. So that helped me quit seeing them as like the enemy and
Sure.
just as a bigger part of the team.
Mhm.
And so that's my approach when we go in. But I have seen culture here really change since I've been here.
Mhm. No, and thank you for saying that. I feel like in some groups it's like, okay, they don't have your best interest. I mean, there are instances where there's obstetric violence and like all this stuff. So
Yeah.
I think there's definitely both sides of it, you know, just in any profession, there's good people who have your best interests, and then people who aren't looking out for that, and who don't
Absolutely.
care. So ultimately, I think it's really important to, no matter who your provider is, to ask questions and get to know them and make sure they support you in whatever birth wishes you want.
And to know that it's never too late to change your care providers. I've had
Absolutely.
people come to me at 38 weeks because they could not imagine birthing in the hospital with that doctor.
Mm,
And as long as they've been low risk and have had care, we can do that.
awesome.
But even if they go to another doctor or another hospital, like, don't settle. Don't just think it'll be fine this one time.
Yeah.
This experience is too big to settle for. It'll be okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
100% agree. Um, I feel like I have so many other questions for you. Like, this is a really good conversation. I love it. So me living in the mountains, and a lot of my clients are up here in the mountain communities. What do you support mountain home births, and do you take any extra like precautions or preparation as far as that goes? Because obviously we're a little bit further away from the nearest hospital.
Yeah. Right now, I have not been serving the mountain clients. We do have a couple of midwives out there, I believe, who are taking care of the front range. And I hope, if not, there needs to be.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, we're just a little more cautious on the transport. I was maybe a little bit sooner with giving the shot of Pitocin for bleeding, because knowing like it would be 40 minutes for the ambulance to get to us. So you have to stabilize much faster.
Sure.
Yeah, so you just do things a little more cautiously, and you look, 10 steps down versus just 5 steps down the road of what might be going on.
Yeah.
And for you doing mountain births up there, I would definitely say get some neonatal resuscitation training, because some of your clients could have a precipitous labor and you might be the only person there.
Yes. Interesting thought. That has been in my head, and I'm always like, oh gosh, like I wouldn't know what to do. I mean, maybe intuitively, but like I think it's important to have training for
Yeah.
that.
I will say intuitively you would know. You
Yeah.
rub the baby, you
Yeah.
move the baby,
Yeah.
but it would help your confidence. And again, like, you might be laboring with them at home before going into the hospital. And
Mhm.
yeah, so
Totally.
yeah, I think it would be a good idea.
Yeah, definitely. Um, how do you include and work with older siblings?
Oh, I love including older siblings as much as they want to be included.
Sure.
You kind of base it on the kids, but I have them help me measure the belly and listen to heart tones. And I have a kid blood pressure cuff in here so they can take blood pressure on mom on one side while I do the other. Yeah, it's just a lot of fun. And as for birth, I want them as involved as the mom wants them involved.
Mhm.
If she knows that she won't be able to get into her birthing brain because her mama brain is wondering about these guys,
Mhm.
then I think they need to be with a trusted adult away.
Mhm.
But if she wants them close, mother hen, I can relax easier knowing my chicks are in the house,
Mhm.
than having a trusted adult for them in the house and knowing that the kiddos can come back and forth.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah, it's fun. I
Yeah.
had one toddler be in the pool when the mom gave birth.
Oh,
Very cool.
it's so special. And that
Mhm.
kind of, just seeing that experience can kind of shift that thinking too.
Definitely.
Mhm. Yeah. Um, okay, so in my course, I kind of talk about the price of having home birth. It's a lot less expensive than um, hospital
Mhm.
and even birth center. So, do midwives take insurance at this point in Colorado, or does it depend, or do you pay out of pocket? How does that
It
work?
it's typically out of pocket because most insurances and Medicaid do not cover home birth.
Mhm.
We have been trying to get the GAPA's exception for clients who want to use insurance, which is saying that there's no other home birth providers in the area. So um, we get they get an in-network with us. So we're not covered, but we can go toward their deductible.
Sure. Sorry.
That's okay. I personally don't like working with insurance, so I've hired a biller
Okay.
to do all of that for me because
Gotcha.
it's like a whole nother language. I think some midwives might do it themselves, but
Mhm.
it's a little crazy.
Yeah, totally. I can only
Uh-huh.
imagine.
Yeah. So out of pocket usually is due before 36 weeks. How much it costs depend on the midwife experience and where they're at and what they have to offer, if there's an adjunct to what they're doing.
Mhm.
But I think for the amount of care that we give and the attention that we give, we are so worth that out of pocket expense.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. Cool. Um, so I would love your 2 cents on working with doulas in a home birth situation.
Mhm. Um, so some doulas have a preference for where they want to be. Some really like the hospital, some really like home. Some can go back and forth really beautifully and easily. It is a little different. It is the monitoring that we do is different. We're almost always in the room. It's just can be very different. So if a doula is not familiar with home birth, I definitely want her to come and talk to me about what she sees and what she's feeling and maybe why I'm doing that. Not in a you're doing it wrong, but in a why, curious kind of
Curious.
way.
Sure.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But I think, the more people there to love on the birthing person, the better.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that the doula, we're all part of the same team. We're all there to be of service.
Mm-hmm.
And we all have our specific roles.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome.
And when the doula's not there, we often do those things that they do, like provide more verbal support, physical support, make sure their hydration, make sure they're eating. But it is nice when we have extra hands for that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So when do you typically join your families in labor? You may have already
Um,
said it, but I can't recall.
I don't think so.
Okay.
Typically is when they want me or active labor.
Sure. Okay.
So active labor now is considered around 6 centimeters.
Mhm.
It used to be 4 and they moved it a few years ago. So 6 centimeters is active, but also an active pattern of like 5 minutes apart, a minute long
Mhm.
or less. then I need to be there.
Sure.
But even if it's just an emotional need, like she's working through some kind of emotional dystocia, I'm happy to come sooner than that. Or if she has a terrified partner who wants me there, then I'll come do that.
Awesome.
Yeah. And earlier we were talking about the second midwife. So she usually comes when they're in transition, but if it is a long labor, I will often have them come and labor sit so that I can take a nap.
Yeah.
Because you want me to be fresh when the baby comes out in case there is an emergency to handle. I mean, adrenaline does a lot, but a nap can go a long way in that too. And that would be the other time that the second midwife might come earlier than transition.
Cool.
Yeah.
Naps are like key, even like 20, 30 minutes.
Yeah.
So good.
Even 5 minutes, like in between
totally.
contractions, if a mom can sleep for 5 minutes, like it helps with so much.
Yep.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, I think, I do have one other question. So those considering a home birth, what would be good questions to ask their midwife, or like during the interview process, trying to find a home birth midwife? Are there certain questions that you like to be asked or think are really important?
I don't know. I will say that it's very typical for the second partner to be the one to ask about finances. Like the birthing person asks about like what the care schedule looks like and how can they be in touch with me and what do we do for emergencies? And then the second partner is usually like, okay, let's talk logistics. What does the money do? How much is it? So that's really interesting because that's been pretty consistent across my practice. And yeah, just whatever is important to them. Like, is it that you want a little bit more medical testing, even though you're a home birth client? Like, let us know that because we want to know where you're at on that spectrum. Some want no testing, some want all of it, and they still want the home birth. So, so ask us what the key points are for them.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Awesome. So last thing, what areas do you serve and how can people find you?
I am in Boulder County and I also serve like up to Fort Collins down to I-70 area. As you know, I recently did Allenstown or Lyons and out a little bit past I-25, like Firestone area. And for the right people, I'm willing to travel, you know, and many of us midwives are listed on the Colorado Midwives Association page.
Cool.
And that's where you can just kind of see all of us. You can see where we're located and our pictures and just a little blurb about each of us. But not all midwives advertise there. So definitely just Google home birth midwives in my area and see what comes up. Awesome. But mostly I have to say it's word of mouth these days.
Yep.
You know, so I'm very fortunate. For that. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, is there anything else you would like to share? We covered a lot. It's just empowering. It's empowering for the moms. It's empowering for the partners and for the babies. It's just, we midwives believe in the process. That the bodies almost always know how to work just fine without interference. And we are just there as guides to help them stay in that flow. Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you for all you do. You're wonderful. I hope I get to work with you soon.
Allie, thank you so much. I hope we do too. I do. Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks for joining me today and we'll talk soon.
I hope so. Bye.
Bye.